So this is Danielle's really great question. How to invite our readers into the conversation. We're in charge, right? We're writing the book. We are, we have control of the keyboard, right? We have control of the page. But how do we write in a way that our reader doesn't feel preached at or teached at or, just written to, and they really feel engaged and they're like they're in a conversation with us and they feel like part. Now we all know it's not a real conversation because they can't say anything. Or if they're saying something, we certainly don't hear it. And the book was written 2 years, right? We were writing that 2 years before they actually got it in their hands. It's not like we can go and respond. So we know it's not a true conversation, but it will certainly improve the experience of our reader if we can write in such a way that they feel like this is an intimate conversation with us, like they are being addressed personally. And it's a conversation that they want to be in. So we're going to look at some of the books, probably most of the books I think that I've written. And I'm going to show you some comments from different reviews because it was really important to me to engage my reader in a way that my reader really felt like this was kind of like a one-on-one conversation, an encouraging conversation that they were having with me. And so this is kind of fun because this is just some evidence that, I was able to succeed in that. And the reason I'm showing you this is because I want you to know this can be done. Okay. And this was a big priority in the books that I wrote. And so I just highlighted some of the things, right? Someone wrote, it's that feeling of elation and fellowship we feel when we have our girlfriends over for tea, and that's recreated with every page. And someone else really identified, right? She says it could have been written about my life. And so she was really identifying and engaged with the content. Someone else said that the author is real, honest, and someone you might like for a close friend. Okay, so this is what I was going for. All right. As you read, you feel as if she's sitting right next to you, sharing her life and giving you hints on how to muddle through the valleys full of stumbling blocks. Reading this book is like listening to a friend. If we lived in the same city, I think we would be. So if your goal is to engage your reader so that they really feel, wow, you know what? I feel really connected. I feel really engaged. I feel connected with this author. I feel engaged. I feel like my needs were well represented in this book. Then these are some tips that are going to help you. So let's talk first about topic. All right, if you want your reader to answer your invitation to be in this conversation with you, then you have to make it a conversation that matters to your reader, right? If there is a conversation that we're not interested in, you can invite me all day long. I'm not going to engage on any deep level. If we're at a party and it's a conversation that I just think is kind of boring or doesn't really apply to me, I may nod my head politely. I may stick around for 10 minutes until I can find a reason to go start a conversation somewhere else. So the topic has to be one that really, really matters. And all of you, actually, you are dealing with topics that really do matter to your reader. So I don't see a problem with any one of you. Whether it's grief, whether it's assisting someone through grief or through tough times, and being an encouragement, whether it's parenting. These are the topics that people that matter to people. So we really want the conversation to resonate with the reader. Like, wow, this is a need that I really have. I feel this need. This is a pain point. I think about this. I want this solved. You know how you are, I don't know, you are in a group and somebody can just, well, let me do it this way. The more we think about the felt need of our readers, and what keeps them awake at night and what their pain point is. And as we write that down and we make lists and we begin to look at that, it gives us key words that are really going to tap into what our reader is feeling. And so whether it's, if I'm really looking at grieving, and I really am asking myself questions like, you know, how does my reader feel? Well, my reader might feel abandoned. My reader might feel like nobody understands. My reader might feel, you know, whatever the words are that really describe, or what does my reader want to feel like? Do they want to feel peace over something, or do they need closure, or do they long for, you know, what are they longing for? Do they want some sort of a resolution? Whatever it is. But as we answer those kind of questions, it gives us keywords, it gives us important words that really match how our reader either feels or how they want to feel. And what that can do is, those are the words that are going to grab our reader's attention. So just like you're at a party and you're in a room and there's a lot of people talking, and okay, I love, I don't know, I want to build a hobbit hole one day. I do. I want to have like 40 acres and I just want to recreate the Shire. So this is like some dream of mine. So trust me, if I'm in a room full of people and someone is talking about how to build an earth bermed hobbit hole, I'm going to be in that conversation. Right? I'm going to gravitate to that because it's of interest to me. So when we know the keywords that make our reader like perk up and pay attention, those are the words that we want to be using as we're inviting them into this conversation, because it grabs their attention. Humor, right? Humor always helps. Now, not every book is going to lend itself to humor. So this is kind of one of those things that if it fits, use it. But we all like humor. We all like, you know, to laugh. And in my books, I wrote about some very, very serious things. I wrote about depression. I wrote about grieving. I wrote about dealing with stress. And I looked for ways, even in very serious conversations, to bring in some humor. But again, that's as appropriate to the topic and also to your writing style. So, but so your topic, you want to make it one that would make your reader's ears perk up if they heard these keywords, if they heard something about this topic in a crowded room. So that has to be, because if you don't get this right, I don't care what you do, writing style, I don't care what you do, and the other things that we're going to talk about, your reader is not going to really feel like, oh, this is, you know, we're kind of having this really great conversation here. Okay, so the next one is audience. And it took me a while to figure this out. Some of my earlier books, I would start writing things where I would say, now listen, ladies, or listen, parents, or moms, or whatever it was. It's like, and I learned earlier on, scrap that, because you are not writing to a group of people. You are writing to one person, because that's how we consume books. It's very one-on-one. And it can feel very intimate. It can feel like, wow, this person really knows, this author really knows what I'm struggling with, and they really get it, and they're talking to me, and they are encouraging me. So it feels very, very personal. I don't have a lot to say on that, but when you are writing, picture one person, and in your language, you are not writing to groups, you are writing to one person. So that is that. I think that is a really important distinctive, you know, as we talk about writing, that really, really engages your readers. Okay, now we're going to talk about writing style. Now, I'm going to say some of this is going to be based on your personal writing style, but these are things that can help. Now, these are things I did, like all of these things, but you may say, well, this one doesn't apply to me. Okay, then don't use that one, but then use some of the others. So these are things to pick and choose from, but all of them are going to play a role in helping your reader feel, you know, like they're really involved in this conversation with you in this book. Now, conversational. Now, this was also kind of a hallmark of my style, because I was presenting myself not as, you know, I'm not the expert. I'm just another mom, woman, neighbor, friend, just like you, and we're going to kind of get through this together. Dawn, you may be presenting yourself more as, you're more of a mentor. But even a mentor, it can still be conversational. So, when I say conversational, it doesn't have to be, hey, I'm your neighbor next door, come over for tea. That doesn't have to be your persona. That was my persona. Okay. That may or may not be yours, but that's okay. If you have a mentor who is encouraging and conversational in how they speak to you, it's not like you're reading a textbook. It's like just someone speaking to you. So conversational can fit, even if you're more of an encouraging mentor or expert on a topic. Conversational is easy to read. It's just easy to read and to consume. Because it sounds like the way people talk, and we're used to that. Authentic and vulnerable. That always makes people feel like, wow, they're sharing this with me about their life. It does make it feel more intimate. It does make it feel more like a conversation. Now, that's not to say that we can't do these same things from a pulpit or from the stage when we're speaking. In fact, I had the most amazing experience. I went to some big conference, and my church was involved in a number of churches. And so there were people there that I knew because part of the group was there from my church, but there was also a lot of people I didn't know. And I'm walking down a stairwell, and there was a woman that she started to come up the stairwell. And all of a sudden she stopped and she goes, hi. She goes, I know you. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. That conversation, okay, where do we know each other from? And you stand there for a few minutes, and you're trying to remember where you knew each other from. And then she said, well, and we couldn't remember. Do you go to my church? No, she went to a different church. Was it this? Was it this? Do we live in the same city? Do we shop at the same grocery store? We couldn't find any other connection. And she goes, no. I know. I remember we sat there and we had the best conversation, and we kept trying to figure it out. Finally, it dawned on us. She was in a Bible study group, and I had been a guest speaker to the group. So there was 40 women in this room, and I was up on a stage. We had not had an intimate one-on-one conversation. I was presenting and speaking to this group. And yet that's how she remembered it. We had the best conversation, you and I. And so these kind of things, when we're conversational, whether it's in our speaking, whether it's when we're authentic and vulnerable, it does create that feeling in the reader of or the listener, right? Of that this is a more personal conversation, and they're engaged in it. Okay, humor can be helpful. Again, this is as appropriate to your writing style and to your, and to your topic and to your, all of that. So that's one of those things that may fit for you. It may not, but who doesn't like to laugh? So, but, you can take that or leave that. Now, here's something else that we want to do. We want to switch it up so it's not just about me. Now, when I'm writing, it's really, really easy for me to tell my stories and my observations and my insights, because once again, I'm in charge of the keyboard, I'm in charge of the page, and this is the stuff I know most of all. I know this better than anything, what my experiences were and what it was like for me, and then what happened next in my life and all this kind of stuff. But we've all had friends, right, that we're in a conversation with them and all they do is talk about themselves. Now, we may still love them, we may still hang out with them, but sometimes we're like, I can take about this much, right? I have my limits, but I love this person, I want to hang out, but I make it shorter times because it just doesn't feel then I'm invited into the conversation. And we don't want to do that in our books either, right? So we don't want to be the one that's just doing all the talking. So tell your own stories, absolutely, your insights, your reflections. So we want to switch it up. We want it to be, we want our writing style to feel like, hey, sometimes we're telling our own story. Sometimes we're addressing the reader. And I have in my next slide, we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Sometimes I share practical tips, almost like it's a magazine article, right? And I'm just writing, hey, you know what, here's like 5 things that you're really going to like. And it's not even, some of them are based on my experiences. Some of them I've done research. So here I'm giving, so it doesn't feel like it's all about me, but here's some really practical tips. Here's 10 ways to do this. And, you know, and maybe here's 10 things to say to someone, you know, who's grieving. So maybe I'm going to do that, right? So I'm going to give some practical tips. I may tell other people's stories. I may say, you know what, a friend of mine was going through this and this was her experience. Again, that takes the focus off of me. It's not just all about me. Or sometimes I will interview people and let them share in their own words something, and they get to talk, right? So these are all writing style strategies that create the impression. It's more than an impression. It actually, you know, creates a scenario where the whole book isn't just you and your stories or your insights or here's my opinion, right? So we're quoting other people, we're telling other people's story, we're sharing practical tips, we're addressing the reader, you know, all of these things. So we're kind of mixing it up, and that is going to also be very engaging to your reader. Now I want to talk about addressing the reader. Okay, so I do this, I will make sure that in a chapter, it could be 2 or 3 times that I pause what I'm doing, I pause my stories, I pause talking about other people, and I specifically address the reader. And it could be something like, hey, listen, I don't know about you, but, you know, here's what I've experienced, or here's what, but just even that, you know, you know, obviously I can't know what's going on specifically in your life, but or I may say something like, you know what, perhaps you've been discouraged too. Maybe you've even experienced your own struggles with depression, or whatever my topic is, right? I was making this up. If so, like me, you probably had days when putting on matching socks and shoes was a challenge, right? But again, I'm giving a list of things of how they might feel, what they're going to identify with. So listen, whether you've struggled with depression or whether you love someone who struggled with depression, let's talk about some active things, some things that will really help. And so just by taking those 3 or 4 lines and bringing it home to the reader, and even making some assumptions on how they feel, and I'll throw out 2 or 3 things, because if one doesn't apply to them, maybe the next thing will. But again, I'm doing it just very conversationally, right? And then, you know, and then here I'm saying, then, you know, here's another example. What if we had, now here what I'm doing is I switched from you to we. So I'm saying, hey, kind of like we're all in the same boat, but it includes the reader. What if we had an emotional first aid kit filled with ideas and strategies that can promote healing? Or, hey, and I know I'm switching metaphors here, right? But what if we had a toolbox brimming with cool stuff we could use to build a better life? So again, it's kind of conversational. I used mixed metaphors, but I said, hey, I know I'm using mixed metaphors, but here's the point. What if we had this? What if we could do this? And so by doing that, just by switching to we, I am really including the reader in this conversation. Now, it's okay to switch between I and you and we. What we don't want to do is we don't want to do it in the same paragraph. We don't want to, I usually try to do them in separate paragraphs. We just don't want to go really quick from I to you to we back to I. I mean, we just don't want to make once we make that transition, the reader can track with us. So then let's stick with that kind of for that paragraph. And then, you know, if we want to, you know, switch it up the next paragraph, we can absolutely do that. But again, these are things that are really going to help the reader feel like they're really being invited into the conversation. This is as much about them as it is, it's very much about them, right? Okay, so now here are some other devices we can use to really invite engagement with our reader. And we've all seen books that have reflection questions at the end. So that's kind of a really common way. You could even have a survey or a quiz. Hey, check this off. Fill in the blank. We could have journaling prompts. Now, I see lots of books with journal. I like them. I think they're really cool. Do I ever do them? No, but they do make me feel more engaged, and it does give me something to think about. So I think that so some of these devices I worked on a devotional with a woman, and she had all these really cool devotions, and we really wanted to make this journal more interactive. And so we put like doodling pages, and we invited people. We put bullet dot pages for people to journal and doodle, and we put some coloring pages in there. I mean, it was really cool. So each devotion had like reflection questions and a doodle page and a coloring page, and so we're really saying engage with this with this book. So things like that. There are devices that we can use as authors that do really invite our readers to engage and feel like they really are part of the conversation. Okay, so let me hear your thoughts. April, you didn't have to come back inside.
It was too stinking hot. I couldn't do it.
Okay. All right, got it. All right. I couldn't see all of you when I was doing the PowerPoint. So, okay, any thoughts or questions, or any thoughts on how this could apply to what you're doing, or anything you think might be helpful, or something that you're like, that's a great idea, that wouldn't work for me because whatever. Let me hear from you.
I loved all of the different ways to address the reader. Like, I don't know about you, and perhaps you've been discouraged, and how you talked about switching from I to you to we, and maybe going back, but in different paragraphs. I think that's probably, I could have a whole session on just different phrases to address the reader, because I feel like when I'm writing, I get stuck with the same things. Like, I feel like I get stuck in that rut. And so I feel like I'm using the same sort of the same sentences to address the reader. So I'm always looking for ways to kind of jazz it up a little bit.
And maybe we could brainstorm. Does anybody have things that they've phrases that you've used that have worked? I mean, and it would be fun even to I don't know, like come up with a bigger list, right? And maybe we'll even do this in Word Ninjas. I can raise that question and put
that'd
that
be fun
in a post, right?
And I feel like I'm always, I feel like whatever people are thinking, I'm going to be thinking the opposite. Okay, like I'm just going to be totally vulnerable here. When the parents are lamenting about, oh, it's back to school time, and they're like, oh, woe is me, they feel so sad. I'm like, pass the margarita. I cannot wait. Like, I am the teetotal opposite. Like, I'm just like, so sometimes I want to be vulnerable and say things like, I don't know about you, but I can't wait for these kids to get out of my house. They're driving me crazy. And then I'm kind of concerned, like, yeah, well, nobody else is going to think like that. So.
Now, I have to tell you, I get a lot of pictures and memes on my Facebook page of parents posting that picture of them in the pool holding the margarita as their kids are standing looking forlorn on the edge of the pool holding their backpacks, gonna go catch the bus.
Yeah.
Mom is already in the pool, on the floaty celebrating. So I don't know. I've seen a lot of those.
I think if you address that you feel like you're not an outsider, but that, I mean, to me, that's engaging. When you say, hey, I don't know about you, but the majority says this, and yet, to be quite honest with you, here's how I really feel. Like, as a reader, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I've had those days. I may not need a margarita every day, but I can still feel that. And the other two words that I've found that help me. You may feel this, or maybe this is where you're at, or you might have experienced these emotions. I found those 3 words, may, might, and maybe, kind of help me soften something that, because I can be writing along and including my reader, and then somebody will read it and they'll go, oh, this sentence was like, pull out your teacher finger and say, this is how it is, you know? So I always want to be very careful of those sentences that surprise my reader. Does that make sense?
So what did you say? Maybe this is where you're at, and you said something.
You might be feeling.
You might be feeling.
Might, or maybe you've experienced this, because then they'll come in and say, oh yeah, that, like, that'll pull them into a past personal experience.
Or even perhaps, right?
Right.
Or perhaps this. And depending on what the point is of that, what you're saying, you can even put opposite things in there, right? Maybe you're feeling sad that your kids are going off to school and, oh my gosh, they're growing up so fast. Or perhaps, like me, you're celebrating, you bring out the party favors, as soon as you hear the rumble of the buses. But either way, you know what? It's a transition for all of us, or whatever. So even if you are showing contrasting things, what you want to do is you're kind of throwing out some options for your reader to go, oh yeah, that's me. They don't have to see themselves in all 3 of them. Right? If they see one of them, they forget about the others. They're like, oh my gosh, yeah, she totally gets me.